most interesting what he mentioned and what I thought maybe I'd pick up, and I realized probably we come from the same kind of like edge set when you talked about the hip hop, how hip hop came into Kenya with the movies like Electric Boogaloo. You know, those are things that, you know, we were in school, and we had to sneak into theaters to see them because some of them were under like, or you had to be over 16. And those of us who, you know, we had to actually borrow jackets and try to look very big so that, you know, the bouncer at the gate looks at you and says, Rudy, then you say, well, what do I do? So you have got to come at night, you know, like when it's a bit dark. Then you can, but it's very interesting because, and the joke is that even back in the days, when you talked about people speaking English, it was Nairobi and elsewhere. Mombasa was basically Swahili. But the joke is that the people actually who brought English into music were from Mombasa. Slim Ali, Jingo, you know, Kelly Brown, you know. These are people who are actually married from Mombasa, and they were coming and singing in English. And it was quite interesting because, like, you know, that kind of movement, and it was quite big because, like, now he's also talking about an area whereby I also was like out of the country and I used to listen out to things and say, wait a minute, what's happening? Because if you look at it, the musical explosion actually came around the year 2000, towards the end of the 90s. But back before the 90s, you know, during the 90s, the big music was basically like DJing, you know, discotheques. Discotheques were the in thing of the 90s. We never had a lot. We had, the bands actually used to come from Mombasa. Earthquake, we used Safari Sound, the Mushrooms, those were the biggest. But initially, of course, we had heard the likes of Ashanti, of you know, Steel Buta in the back days in the 50s and 60s. Those were the guys actually who are hitting the waves. But then came a time whereby now the bands. But even interestingly, when you talk about, like, you know, live music in clubs, we also used to have, I mean, you mentioned something about the jam sessions. Those are the things, in the days we used to call them boogies. I know there are very few, when I look around, I can't see many people who can relate to the word boogie. The boogies, yeah, there's quite a few hands. The boogies were actually afternoon jam sessions. And they used to be big as far as Lake Victoria, Kisumu. Kisumu, there used to be a place called Hippo Point. I don't know if it exists anymore, or rather it has all been developed, because like everything else is. And we used to have at Hippo Point, it was actually at the lakeside, and it was an afternoon session. And we used to have big bands, like Lenoir, we used to play there, and mostly there were bands which were coming in from Kinshasa. Interestingly, those boogies, our Benga bands never used to come there. The Benga bands, the music we used to enjoy those days were on vinyl, on the discs. Kawere Boys, the likes of Mokabi, Jacob Luceno, Dio Misiani, all this, you know, Kina Ngala, all these were on disc. You couldn't get them live. The live sessions, I don't know, for some reason, our people were not really big on like nightclubs, but they used to maybe like perform at sessions like weddings, like parties. But the people actually who carried the music to the nightclubs were foreign bands. For instance, like in Kisumu, we had Hot Fives, we had the Kange Brothers, we had the High Fives, who are playing at, you know, there's a club in Kisumu called there's a club along, I think was it the Hot Five something. But, so we are talking about genre whereby like people in Nairobi and Mombasa and the other places, it was kind of like, you know, there was kind of like a very quiet challenge. Like Mombasa used to come up and show, we've got this. And Nairobi also said, no, we've got this. That's why you're fine. I'm not surprised to find that, you know, there's a Florida in Nairobi and there's another Florida in Mombasa. So if people will say, oh, Florida. But the big clubs, used to be interestingly, very funnily situated. Like, for instance, the Malindi Club, which was one of the biggest clubs, around the days when we had Starlight here in Nairobi, we had Harlian's Club here in, down Tomboya Street. Those were the bands that, the noise that is in Nairobi today, I'm surprised because there's so many clubs. When I came back after 17 years and I was saying, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? I thought because we had Visions, we had Florida, and then we had at Kenya Cinema, the Arturos. Those were the clubs that were there. And then, of course, there was Boomerang, Ainsworth, out of town, like Club 19. They were outside town. But within the town center, we had only the Visions, Tamango, which was I think at some point called Tamango. Then we had, of course, Florida, which changed all the Arcadia, all those, many names. Of course, Garden Square in the middle, and then there's Inn on the Park. But when you look at the musicians had to kind of shuttling through from Nairobi to Mombasa and back. But the fans, I don't know, for some reason, there wasn't that kind of cohesion. It was kind of like, hey, we guys, the people who are in Nairobi, we enjoy a certain type of music. And yeah, when you go to Mombasa, where are you going to? And there are people like Mombasa, people began, because I wonder why them mushrooms, moved up to Nairobi. And then you found that, with that kind of mix, we really needed a story to tell. And that's why, I'm forever grateful for Ketable to have brought up that book, Shades of Benga. If you haven't read that book, then you need to read. If you want to know the history of Kenyan music, get yourself a copy of Ketable. And I think that's why, even the younger generation, I believe we are picking too much from outside instead of picking from inside. We have such rich resource within the country, and yet you go to a club and when you listen to somebody rapping and you say, wait a minute, am I in Kenya or am somewhere New Jersey, in the UK or Ibiza or what? We need to identify ourselves. I think with the kind of talent that sprung around, if you could get people like Gary Brown going up to the stage, like Ashantis. And you can imagine in the 50s, we had bands like the Ashantis going to Europe, going to Japan, and yet today, how many of our musicians are going out? Even the so-called, the rap artists. If they go out there, maybe they've been invited by the diaspora Kenyans. Not by bands. The bands that used to go out there were not going there they were not saying going to play for diaspora Kenyans. No, they were going to play for those audiences there. And some of those audiences that wanted to see the indigenous African music. But you see, it's like, you invite a friend coming from Britain, they come here and you're going to take them to have fish and chips. You look at it, excuse me? I'm coming to Africa. I want to explore Africa. I want to enjoy what is African. You are giving me fish and chips, which is the traditional dish of the Britons, of where I come from. My mother has been cooking fish and chips from there. That's all that we used to eat. So when you talk about live programming, and we know we really need to get out there, we need to get out of our comfort zones. And for the young people, okay, fine, I had earlier, of course, they talk about, people borrowing from, the young people borrowing from the older generation borrowing from the younger generation. I think maybe for me it's more more one way than the other. I think it's more about the young people. What can they pick of the older generation and how can they be able to redevelop it and bring it to make it their own? Take responsibility, take ownership. Look at even our friends across from Tanzania. When they are playing, you can still see that flavor there, that Tanzanian thing. But our Kenyan artists, we want to sound very English, very American. And I can't blame you guys because like even with accent, look at the Nigerian. They took their oga. But here, if you speak like with an accent, this guy does not know English. If I speak like Buanatu, you know where I come from. I come from Western Party, but you begin laughing at me. But the Ogas are speaking that language in their tradition, and that's what we have. Like even the West Indies, they've got the Patua. It is identity. Are we losing it? And I think that's what we need to ask ourselves. Where are we, and where are we going with this? And the media, it's like I remember when we were closer, behind here in the KBC, the policies used to kind of like dictate what is consumed by the public. At one time, one director came, and one time we were called to a meeting, and we were told, from today, no vernacular music. Boom. He's the boss. And at that time, because it was the only broadcasting station, there's nothing you can do. And of course, if there's no vernacular music playing, then it means nobody, whatever music you're going to consume is not going to be vernacular. But what were we saying? We were defeating ourselves. Then all of a sudden it gets, okay, fine, because we are the general service, which is supposed to cater for English, and the national service, which is supposed to cater for Swahili. But then you see, at the end of the day, the DJs began sneaking in records. We used to have a situation whereby, the DJs used to sneak in records. You talk to the watchman, to the guy at the gate, talk properly, and then you see in your big coat, you've got the albums are there, and you sneak in. And some of those DJs are here understood they used to actually get some kickbacks from the record producers. So, of course, that was, again, another lucrative way of getting some extra cash, and you sneak in the music, then you play the music. But it's very interesting that, when you play that music, sometimes people will say, wait a minute, but that music is not in the library. So how come we are hearing? But interestingly, I think we had librarians who are not very good at monitoring. So they wouldn't say, and it's anybody else, when they hear, they think it's been come. Because even the library section, I don't know if maybe it's been formalized these days, a record would come in, maybe like in March, and it's ready for being given to for playing in June. I mean, like, seriously? If a record comes in March, obviously it's already a hit elsewhere. But Kenya has been like that. And I think we really need to interrogate some of the things that we do, some of the things that, we enjoy in terms of, like, we are enjoying this music, yeah, we are enjoying this genre, but exactly ask ourselves, who are we? We must not at any one time lose our identity. In whatever we do, we must be able to say, yes, we can sample ABC, but we know at the end of the day, we know what? I know we go out, and of course, you're not going to take your children out or your friend out to go and eat ugali. For me, it's ugali. Whether it's in the restaurant, whether it's where, even on the plane. The first time I said, wait a minute, I'm ugali on the plane. But for some people, you say, no, you're going to have ugali at home, so you might as well have that chips. But for me, fast food is not my food. And what we are talking about, the foreign musical genres, we should be able to adapt to it. You should be able to adopt some of the things that are in the foreign music, but blend them with our local content. I think that's the way to go.